Hi everyone, welcome back to the Hobby Homestead. Today I have a lot of currants to harvest, so I'm bringing you along to pick berries with me. I thought I'd pass the time by sharing some of the lore and legend of this underrated summer berry. These jewel-like fruits have been growing in gardens and forest edges for centuries. Back in medieval Europe, red currants were grown in the gardens of monasteries, and the monks valued them not just for their flavor, but for their healing powers. Currants were steeped into teas, used in syrups, and believed to cool fevers, calm inflammation, and soothe the stomach. In fact, they were once considered something of a medicinal treasure, a natural remedy passed down through generations of herbalists and healers. But it's not just their history of medicinal use that's interesting. These berries also appear in folklore. In German, red currants are called Johannisbeeren, or John's berries, because they ripen right around St. John's Day, June 24th. This day was a time of bonfires, feasts, and nature magic, and red currants picked on or around this day were believed to carry a little extra power, whether for health, for luck, or for love. Over in England, during the Victorian era, red currant jelly became a staple on the dinner table. It was served with lamb, game meats, or roasted fowl, kind of like how we treat cranberry sauce here in North America. And in France, there's a town called Bar-le-Duc that still makes a hand-seeded red currant preserve. At least historically, the seeds were removed with the quill of a goose feather, one by one. In the garden, red currants attract birds, bees, and sometimes spirits. Some old European folk traditions even suggested placing currant branches in doorways or under pillows to ward off illnesses or to bring sweet dreams.
When I'm picking currants, I channel my grandma on my mother's side. She came here from the Netherlands with 3 little kids and one in her belly who was my mom. And she started homesteading. I would spend summers there with my grandma picking currants, making currant jellies, and I would eat my fill of the fresh currants as I was picking them. And she didn't have this newer variety, the pink champagne currant. But if she was still alive and gardening, I would definitely gift her a cutting of this bush, because these currants are out of this world. I would have such a different relationship with my grandmother if she was still alive, because I'm maturing and I'm becoming more like her in many ways, and I would share a lot more of her interests at this age and stage in my life. She always knew I loved gardening and being in the garden with her, but the whole homesteading thing and making all of our food, yeah, we would have bonded a lot more than we already did. So my grandma always taught me to pick currants like this. You pick the whole little stem off with all the berries. And we do that with the red currants because they're tinier and it's just too labor intensive. But the big pink champagne currants, they're like these big plump berries that come off really easily one by one. And the problem with picking them the easy way, just a whole little stick of berries, is that they don't always all ripen at the same time. So you'll end up with some that are completely not ripe on the same thing, and then you have to sort them inside anyway. So I prefer to sort them as I'm picking, and then you can come back later and these ones will have ripened. But it is a lot more work.
These are gooseberries, and gooseberries and currants are in the same family. They're both really high in pectin. These are actually black velvet gooseberry that I'm picking today. We do have some little native gooseberries, but they're green and a lot more astringent and sour. These ones are gourmet.
It's a pretty good harvest of berries this morning. We got 2 quarts of the pink champagne currants and then a topping of some gooseberries. These are black velvet gooseberries, and more are coming ripe. This is just our first harvest from them. And then we've got 2 quarts of the red currants and just a sampling of some of our earliest red raspberries. Let's throw a couple of our last hascaps in there too for good measure. So there are still some more berries on these plants. There's tons actually. I don't feel the need to pick them all because that's just too many berries. I have a bag full of berries, full of currants in my freezer right now. So whatever I'm going to do with those currants, I can add those frozen ones to it and I'll have more than enough. And then, you know, the wild animals, the birds, the chipmunks, whatever else can come and help themselves to these, although they haven't been. There's enough other things for them to eat. In that case, my kids can continue to graze on these, or I can continue to graze on these as a little garden snack to help me get through the tediousness of weeding in the hot sun. Speaking of the hot sun, I think it's time to head inside now, take our berries into the cool kitchen, and think about what we're going to do with all those currants. I'm really torn as to whether I want to mix the pink and the red currants. I think it would be really cool to have just a pink champagne currant jelly on its own. It would be very pink. But it's also going to be annoying because I may not have really enough. Now in they go. Stems are okay. Stems actually have pectin in them as well. And apparently they have some tannins in them. I learned that from Ashley at Practical Self-Reliance. She's got amazing tips on preserving things. So to these 2 quarts, I'm going to add 1 cup of water. You need about half a cup of water per quart, or just eyeball it, whatever. The whole point here is that when we get this really heating up, I don't want it to just burn to the bottom. Now that my colander's empty, in go the red currants. You can see I've got lots more stems in there, stems and leaves. So the stems have pectin in them. Definitely you can add these if you're making a jelly. And then apparently the stems and leaves have tannins in them, and that can apparently round out the flavor of your currants when you're making jelly. So you can definitely leave them in, makes it a lot simpler. It's simmering right now. Only going to let it simmer for maybe a minute while I continue to mash all these juices. Wow, it's starting to smell amazing. Stove off, remove from heat. And now we're going to pour it through the jelly strainer. This kitchen is not ideal for me. We've got our fan above the stovetop, and I do a lot of things with large pots and pans and things like this, and I don't have enough height. Now we're going to leave this to strain for the rest of the day. I'm going to rig up another one. I don't have another jelly strainer on a stand like this, but I have lots of these bags. You can also use cheesecloth. I'm going to rig up another contraption so that I can strain the red currants as well. Do the same thing with them. And then I might even wait until tomorrow just to drain out like this. Once it's drained and it's all cool, we're going to squeeze the bag to get all that pulp out. Here's my MacGyvered solution. Ow, there are hot currents falling on my bare feet. This isn't the best solution. That is what I got. I chose a strainer bag with a drawstring so I can hang it up. Meanwhile, I forgot about the frozen berries. So I have this bag full of berries as well. So I'm going to get these in the pan next. Another thing that we've done with our currants in the past is make cassis. It's not an authentic cassis because we're not just making a liqueur strictly from black currants, but we take something like brandy and we take whatever colored currants we have, and then you just infuse it in that brandy for, I forget how long, months I think, or maybe you infuse it for like several weeks and then you strain it off and then you let it age a bit, and it's amazing. I really like that version of cassis. I'll see if I can find a recipe for it if somebody's written out the steps to do that, and I'll put it in the description box below in case you're interested. Aside from that, we really like eating them fresh, and then we also really love jams and jellies. We make a lot of homemade bread here, and in the wintertime, there's just nothing better than cracking into a nice jar of summer deliciousness, spreading it on fresh baked bread. Oh, there's nothing better. It's like the go-to after school snack for the kids. It's just jam on bread. It's actually reminding me of my Dutch upbringing. We ate just a lot of jam on bread. Sometimes bread, cheddar cheese, and then jam on top of that too. It's delicious, and it takes me back to my childhood. The other thing that I want to try, but I haven't yet, and now I've gone ahead and put all of my currants in the pot, is dried currants. My one kid really, really, really loves dried fruit, so he'll eat like dried blueberries by the bagful, dried cranberries, which not a lot of kids love because they're pretty tart, and so I feel like he would enjoy dried currants. I just decided to make them into other things this time instead. But maybe next year we'll try some dried currants. It's the next day. I decided to sleep on it and let the juices drip for a really long time. This is what we were left with. It's the pulp, all the stems and skins and seeds. I'm going to give this to my chickens. You know that all the liquid is out, or most of the liquid is out, when they're a lot lighter and fluffier. These are really light and crumbly. This is what we were left with, and yes, I combined the juices. I combined the red and the pink. Now it's time to measure to see how much we got, because we're going to do 1 part juice to 1 part sugar. 1, 2, 6, and pretty much 7. Now with the currants, we're not adding pectin, because they have enough natural pectin on their own. And you probably could get away with adding very little sugar and it would still set. But I want to add 1-to-1 sugar to juice because currants are very, very tart. They're very tart, especially the red ones. And I want this jelly to be decadent and sweet enough that even the kids will like it. So if you're really into like a really tart jelly or jam, maybe try it with less sugar if you want. But I'm going to stick to the 1-to-1 ratio this time. 1, 2, 6, and a scant 7. Now we need to get this up to a boil. I have to do a little burner switcheroo here because I'm putting my steam canner on this burner, the bigger burner, and I'm going to put a little pot of water on very low for my lids. Canning recommendations used to include boiling these lids. Now you're not supposed to boil them, just supposed to warm them up in some hot water. I sterilize my jars in my oven when I'm canning things in the steam canner. I think probably the most common way still to sterilize your jars is to put them in boiling water. But the whole point of my steam canner is that I don't have to use very much water to do canning. So I'm not going to fill a giant pot with water to sterilize the jars in it, only to then not use a giant pot of water to can. I used to sterilize in the same water bath canner that I would then can in, so at least I wasn't wasting all that water. But now I sterilize in my oven. I set it to 250 degrees Fahrenheit, and then I put my jars in there for 30 minutes. There's different information online about how long you actually need to have them in for, so that's just the number I settled on. If you want to start sterilizing jars in the oven, then just do some research and figure out what you're comfortable with in terms of temperature and length of time in the oven. Some people say you risk cracking your jars if you make it too hot for too long, but I have not had that issue. I don't think 250 is that hot. You can scoop the foam off if you want. The foam will appear in your jars after canning. It'll rise to the top and just be like a little foamy surface of jelly. It has the same flavor, doesn't bother me, so I don't worry about it too much. With jams, you can get away with a light set, so if it's just slightly under set, it's okay because there's chunks of fruit and stuff, so it still works. But with jellies, if it doesn't set, then it's just going to be a runny liquid. I use this trick for making sure that my jellies and jams are set now, and it's worked out well for me. Take a frozen plate, pour a little on your plate, and then if you run your finger through it, they should stay separated. They're not really staying separated. We're almost there. It's starting to change consistency a bit. We have another 2 or 3 degrees to go. I could probably benefit from a digital thermometer for this kind of thing because it's a lot of eyeballing and just going by the texture of the jam or the jelly. But this is a good opportunity to tell you about what it takes to get things to gel when you're making jams or jellies. If you're using a commercial pectin, then it'll usually say on the box or on instructions in your recipe how long to boil once you've added the pectin, and you have a much better likelihood of that jam or jelly setting in a short amount of time because you're using added pectin. If you're making a jelly without pectin like we're doing here, we're just relying on the natural pectins in the fruit, then the time that you have to boil this for is going to vary because the natural pectins are going to vary. And really the best way to make sure that it's going to set is to use a thermometer. It's starting to foam, look at this. And to get to know the signs. So it just foamed up. I stirred it back down. There, look at that. That is jelly that is almost set. You can see the bubbling is starting to get a little bit more active. The foam is rising. You want 220 degrees Fahrenheit or 104-ish Celsius, adding degrees for the higher up in altitude you're located. Time for the plate. A little on the plate. It is running back into the middle a little bit. For the most part, though, it's staying separate, and you can see how slowly it's dripping. You can use a spoon, also a cold spoon, dip it, and if it drips in big, slow drips, like that. See that? That is a done jelly. Heat goes off, jars come out. Fill our jars almost to the top with just a 1/4 inch left before the top of the jar. 1/4 inch headspace. This was a much longer boil than I was anticipating. It took about 30 minutes of boiling, so I'm thinking that the pink currants had much lower pectin than red currants, or certainly than black currants do. If you do enough canning, eventually you can eyeball what a 1/4 inch is based on the lines on the rim of the jar. And it doesn't have to be perfect. There are little measuring devices. I have one, but it really doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, I need more jars. I'm going to wipe with some simmering hot water to dissolve any of that sugar that might have landed on the rim. If you're canning meats, you want to do this with vinegar so that it breaks up any fats that might be on the rim. But hot water is sufficient when you're doing this. Super hot lids. Finger tight. Hot, hot, hot. These go in the canner. Okay, get some more jars out. Burn your fingerprints off doing this. Now the way the steam canner works, it's not pressure canning, but the steam does build up in here. So you use a very little bit of water in the bottom of the pot or the pan. You have this big cloche-like lid that fits over the jars, and then you have to adjust this to your own altitude. I have already tested mine, and I know that when this little red gauge gets all the way up between N and O, which is where I've marked it with this little tag, and at that point I'm going to let these can or boil away, steam away for 5 minutes. Then I turn off the heat and I let them sit in here undisturbed for another 5 minutes. Wow, they're all already popping. I don't know how many pints of jelly this made because I don't know what size of jar some of these are. But you can see with your eyeballs how much jelly this made. I think that was a pretty good haul considering how small those berries are. Thank you for coming along with me while we harvested those currants and then turned them into something delicious and exquisite that is shelf stable, can stay in our pantry for years, although it's not going to last that long, let's be honest. I would love to hear from you in the comments what your favorite homestead berry is and what you like to do with it. And as always, I hope that you'll come and grow with us and preserve the harvest with us.